Your brain was not designed for the modern economy. That is not a criticism, it is simply true, and understanding it changes everything about why spending feels so difficult to control. The human brain evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in an environment where resources were scarce and uncertain. The instinct to acquire, to take what is available now because it might not be available later, was survival logic. It kept our ancestors alive through winters, droughts, and unpredictable seasons. That instinct is still fully intact inside you. It has not updated. It does not know that the sale ends Sunday, that the item will almost certainly still be available next week, that the abundance around you is not about to disappear. And then there is the modern economy, which was designed with extraordinary precision and enormous resources to find and activate exactly that instinct. Every notification, every limited time offer, every one-click purchase, every recommended item that appears the moment you finished buying something else, these are not accidents. They are the deliberate engineering of an environment that makes your ancient brain say yes before your conscious mind has had a chance to ask why. This is not a moral failure, it is a design problem. And design problems have design solutions. In Japan, a culture that has maintained one of the highest household savings rates in the developed world for decades, averaging between 15 and 25% of income even through periods of economic difficulty, the solution has never been deprivation or extreme discipline. It has been something far more interesting, the quiet, consistent training of the brain through small, daily habits that, over time, rewire the automatic response to spending. Not willpower, not restriction, training. There are 8 of these habits. They are small enough that none of them will feel significant on the day you begin. That is entirely the point. The Japanese concept of kaizen, continuous improvement through the smallest possible steps, teaches that transformation never arrives through dramatic gestures. It arrives through the accumulation of tiny, consistent practices, each one almost invisible on its own, collectively becoming the person you are becoming. Here are the 8. The first habit is called Mada Tsukaeru. It can still be used. It is a phrase spoken in Japanese households, often by older generations to younger ones, when something is about to be discarded or replaced before its useful life has ended. And it is the first line of defense against the brain's tendency to equate novelty with necessity. The brain has a well-documented bias toward new things. Neuroscientists call it the novelty bias, the dopamine response that new stimuli triggers, which feels like excitement and gets interpreted as need. The new phone feels necessary. The new version of the thing you already have feels like an upgrade your current life requires. This feeling is real. It is neurochemical. But it is not information about the object. It is information about the brain's response to newness. Madatsukeru is a habit of interrupting that response with a simple, factual question. Can this thing I already have still be used? Not, is it the newest version? Not, is there something better available? Can this one, the one already in my possession, still perform the function it was purchased to perform? When you make this question habitual, when it becomes the first thing you ask before considering any replacement, something interesting happens in the brain. The novelty response doesn't disappear, but it gets met with a competing signal, the recognition of existing value. And that recognition, practiced consistently, gradually strengthens until it becomes the automatic response rather than the override. Think about the Japanese art of kintsugi, the practice of repairing broken pottery with gold, making the repaired piece more beautiful and more valuable than the unbroken original. Kintsugi does not pretend the crack didn't happen. It celebrates the repair. It says that the history of an object, its use, its damage, its mending, is not a reason to discard it. It is the story of what makes it irreplaceable. Madatsukeru is kintsugi applied to the ordinary objects of daily life. The scratched laptop that still runs perfectly. The jacket with the worn collar that still fits and still keeps you warm. The pan with the handle that needs tightening but cooks exactly as it always has. These are not objects waiting to be replaced. They are objects with stories. Still useful, still worthy. Try this. Identify one item in your home that you've been thinking about replacing, not because it's broken, but because something newer exists. Examine it honestly. Ask the question, Madatsukeru, can it still be used? If the answer is yes, make a deliberate decision to use it until the answer changes. Notice how that decision feels, and how the feeling evolves the longer you keep it. The second habit is one that lives at the intersection of Japanese minimalism and neuroscience, and it is the habit that most directly addresses the brain's spending impulse at the moment it is most powerful. It is called ma-wo oku, placing a pause, and it is the practice of introducing a deliberate interval between the moment of wanting and the moment of deciding. The brain's impulse to acquire moves fast. The modern economy has engineered every friction point out of the path between that impulse and its satisfaction. One-click purchasing, saved payment information, same-day delivery. The entire design of online commerce is the elimination of the pause. Ma-wo oku reinserts it. In traditional Japanese aesthetics, Ma describes the space between things, the silence between musical notes, the empty space in a painting, the pause in a conversation. Ma is not absence, it is presence of a different kind. The space between the notes is what gives the music its breath, its meaning, its ability to move you. Without Ma, there is only noise. In spending, the pause between wanting and buying is where your actual values live. It is where the brain has time to move from impulse to intention. And the research on this is remarkably consistent. Across multiple studies, a waiting period of between 24 and 72 hours before a non-essential purchase reduces the likelihood of regret by more than 60%. Not because you always decide not to buy. Because when you decide to buy after the pause, the decision is yours, made from clarity rather than chemistry. I practice this with a simple physical object, a small notebook I keep by my desk called, informally, my waiting list. When I want to buy something that isn't immediately necessary, I write it down with the date, and I don't look at it again for at least 72 hours. Some items I buy after the wait, with full conviction and zero regret. Some I look at after 3 days and can barely remember why I wanted them. Both outcomes are the right outcome, because both are chosen rather than reactive. The Japanese phrase for this, used informally in frugal households, is Sanju Nikki Jikan, the 72-hour rule. Not a restriction, a pause. The space that lets your brain catch up with your values. Try this. Create a waiting list, physical or digital, wherever you'll actually use it. For the next 2 weeks, every non-essential item you want to buy goes on the list with today's date. Nothing gets purchased until at least 72 hours have passed. After 2 weeks, look at what survived the wait and what didn't. The pattern will tell you something important about your brain's spending triggers. The third habit is one of the oldest and most widely practiced financial behaviors in Japanese culture, and it has nothing to do with budgets or numbers. It is called terukuri no yorokobi, the joy of making by hand, and it is the practice of regularly producing things yourself that you might otherwise buy. This is not about extreme frugality. It is about neurochemistry. When you make something yourself, a meal, a gift, a repair, a piece of clothing, a candle, a piece of furniture, your brain releases a cluster of chemicals associated with accomplishment, pride, and satisfaction. Researchers call this the IKEA effect. People consistently value things more when they have been involved in creating them. But the deeper mechanism is more interesting than valuation. The act of making something yourself satisfies a need that buying cannot touch. Much of modern consumer spending is an attempt to satisfy needs that consumption is structurally incapable of satisfying. The need to feel capable, the need to feel creative, the need to feel that your hands and your mind are engaged in something that produces something real. When those needs go unmet, they generate a low-grade restlessness that gets misinterpreted as wanting things. And so you buy things, and the restlessness quiets briefly and then returns. Terukuri no yorokobi addresses the restlessness at its source. When you make something, you don't need to buy it. But more than that, you don't need to buy the next thing either, because the need the making has satisfied doesn't reemerge as quickly. A person who cooks their own meals, repairs their own clothes, builds their own furniture, even occasionally, even imperfectly, spends less not because they are restricting themselves, but because they are genuinely more satisfied. In Japan, there is a long tradition of monozukuri, the art and spirit of making things, that is considered not just an economic practice, but a cultural value. The craftsman who makes something with care is expressing something about the relationship between human hands and the material world that cannot be replicated by acquisition. And the household that maintains even a small version of this spirit, that bakes bread occasionally, that mends clothes rather than discarding them, that makes gifts rather than buying them, maintains a connection to the joy of making that naturally reduces the pull of buying. Try this. This week, make one thing that you would normally buy, a meal you'd usually order, a gift you'd usually purchase, a repair you'd usually pay someone else for. Do it with attention and without rushing. Notice what it feels like when the thing is done and the need has been met by your own hands. But if that reframes where satisfaction actually comes from, what comes next goes even deeper into the brain's relationship with money, and it is the habit that changed my daily spending more than any other. The fourth habit is drawn from the Zen tradition that has shaped so much of Japanese daily life, and it is a practice so simple that it will probably sound too small to matter. It is called Ichinichi Ichizen, one good thing each day, and in its financial application, it becomes the practice of ending each day by identifying one moment of genuine satisfaction that costs nothing. The brain's relationship with spending is, at its core, a search for satisfaction. We spend because we are looking for something: comfort, pleasure, relief, the feeling of having enough. And the modern economy has trained the brain to look for that satisfaction in consumption. Want to feel better? Buy something. Want to celebrate? Buy something. Want to reward yourself after a hard day? Buy something. The association between satisfaction and spending is not accidental. It has been built, deliberately, by decades of advertising. Ichi-Nichi Ichi-Zen breaks that association, not by suppressing the search for satisfaction, but by redirecting the brain's attention to the satisfactions that are already present and already free. Each evening, before sleep, the practice asks one question. What was the best moment of today? Not the most productive, not the most impressive, the most satisfying. The cup of coffee in the quiet before the house woke up. The conversation that went somewhere unexpected and good. The moment of sunlight through a window at exactly the right angle. The feeling of a task completed, a book chapter finished, a stretch that released something that had been tight all week. These moments exist in every day, but the brain does not automatically notice them because noticing non-commercial satisfactions has not been reinforced the way commercial satisfactions have. Ichi-Nichi Ichi-Zen trains the brain to notice, to scan the day not for what was missing, but for what was quietly present. Over time, this practice does something remarkable. It gradually recalibrates the brain's baseline for satisfaction. When you regularly experience and acknowledge free satisfactions, the threshold for requiring a purchase to feel satisfied rises. You become genuinely and neurologically harder to sell to, not because you're trying to resist, but because you're already satisfied in ways that spending cannot improve upon. Think about the difference between eating a carefully prepared meal slowly with attention and eating the same meal while scrolling your phone. The food is identical, but the experience of the first is nourishing in a way the second barely is. Ichi-Nichi Ichi-Zen is eating your daily life slowly, noticing it, receiving it, so that the brain stops being hungry in the way that only more can fill. Try this. Tonight and every night this week, write down one moment from the day that was genuinely satisfying and cost nothing. Just one. Keep the list somewhere you'll see it. At the end of 7 days, read the whole list. Notice what your life already contains. The fifth habit is a physical one, and it might be the most immediately practical in this entire list. It comes from the Japanese tradition of Genkin Shugi, cash principle, the preference for physical money over digital payment, maintained in Japan long after most Western countries had abandoned cash almost entirely. Japan remains, remarkably, one of the most cash-oriented developed economies in the world. In 2022, approximately 80% of Japanese transactions by volume were still conducted in cash. This is not technophobia. It is a relationship with money that the Japanese have chosen to preserve because they understand something that the rest of the world is only beginning to research systematically. Physical money hurts to spend. Not literally, but neurologically, the pain centers of the brain are measurably more active when a physical bill leaves your hand than when a card is tapped or a phone is waved. The technical term for this is the pain of paying, and it was documented extensively by behavioral economists Dražen Prelec and Duncan Simister, who found that the more abstract the payment method, the further removed from the physical experience of money leaving your possession, the less pain it produces and the more freely people spend. Digital payments, tap-to-pay, and saved card details are not just convenient, they are analgesic. They numb the brain's natural spending signal. And a numbed spending signal is a spending signal that cannot do its job, which is to tell you, this is real money, earned with real time, and it is leaving. Cash does not let you forget this. When you hold a physical note and hand it to someone, the transaction is visceral. The wallet is lighter. The hand registers the transfer. The brain processes the loss. And that processing, that small but real experience of money as a tangible thing with weight and presence, naturally moderates how freely it moves. I reintroduced cash for certain categories, primarily eating out and discretionary spending, not because I distrust digital payment, but because the physical experience of payment keeps me present to what money actually is, in a way that tapping a card does not. The brain that hands over a 50 and waits for change is a different brain from the one that taps a card without looking up. Try this. For one category of your spending, groceries, dining, entertainment, whatever feels most relevant, switch to cash for 2 weeks. Withdraw the budgeted amount in physical bills at the beginning of the week. Spend only what you have. Notice how the physical experience of money changes the decisions you make with it. The sixth habit is one that the Japanese call katachi wo mamoru, protecting the form, and it is about the power of ritual to shape behavior without requiring conscious decision-making in the moment. A ritual is a sequence of actions performed the same way, in the same order, for the same purpose, every time. Rituals are powerful not because they are magical, but because they are automatic. The brain recognizes the sequence and follows it without the friction of deliberation. And when you build a financial ritual, a specific sequence of actions performed consistently around money, you create an automatic pattern that produces financial behavior without requiring willpower at the moment the behavior is needed. The Japanese tea ceremony is the most famous example of ritual as form. Every gesture, every movement, every element of the ceremony is prescribed. The guest does not decide how to sit or where to place the cup. The form decides. And within the form, there is a quality of presence and peace that would not exist without it, because the form handles the decisions, freeing the participant to simply be present. Financial rituals work identically. A Sunday evening ritual of reviewing the week's spending, same time, same quiet, same cup of tea, same notebook, removes the decision of whether to review. The ritual is the schedule. The form carries you to the behavior, and the behavior happens not because you were disciplined enough to choose it, but because the ritual made choosing unnecessary. The most effective financial rituals I've found are a weekly 15-minute spending review on Sunday evenings, a monthly sit-down on the last day of the month to close the kakebo and open the next, and a quarterly look at the larger picture, savings progress, irregular expenses coming up, any category that has been consistently drifting. Each of these happens at the same time, in the same way, with the same quality of calm attention. And because they are rituals rather than tasks, they have never once felt like a burden. Try this. Choose one financial behavior that you know helps you, but that you don't do consistently. Reviewing spending, updating a budget, checking your balance, and build a ritual around it. Same day, same time, same small preparation. Make tea, sit in a specific chair, open a specific notebook. Do it for 4 consecutive weeks without varying the form. Notice how the ritual starts to carry you to the behavior before you've even decided to go. The 7th habit comes from a concept in Japanese psychology called Mukuchi no Chikara, the power of not saying. It refers to the discipline of restraint not in action, but in expression. The understanding that voicing a desire gives it weight and momentum that silence does not. In financial behavior, this translates into a practice that runs counter to most Western advice about accountability, the habit of not talking about what you want to buy. Western productivity culture loves public commitment. Tell people your goals, the logic goes, and the social pressure will help you keep them. But for spending habits, the research tells a more complex story. When we verbalize a desire, when we tell a friend, "I've been wanting to buy that," or post about something we've been eyeing, or add an item to a shared wish list, we give the desire a social reality it didn't have when it existed only internally. We have, in a small but real way, committed to it. And the brain, which treats social commitments as important, begins to experience the unpurchased item as an unfinished thing, something that needs to be resolved. Mukuchi no Chikara says, "Let the desire be quiet for a while. Don't announce it, don't share it. Let it exist internally, where it can be examined honestly, without the social momentum that verbalization creates." This is not about isolation or keeping secrets. It is about the distinction between a desire that you are genuinely deliberating about and a desire that has been given external weight before you've finished deliberating. The quiet desire can still be bought, but it will be bought from a place of genuine choice, not from the social gravity of having already told people about it. Try this. Notice the next time you're about to mention something you want to buy in conversation or on social media, and don't. Let it stay internal for a week. See if it's still something you want at the end of that week, and whether the wanting feels different when it has existed only inside your own consideration. The 8th and final habit is the one that the others build toward, and it is the one most likely to produce lasting change because it operates not on behavior, but on identity. It is rooted in the Japanese concept of jibun wo tsukuru, building yourself. The understanding that who you are is not fixed, but is something you actively and continuously construct through the choices you make and the habits you maintain. In financial terms, jibun wo tsukuru is the practice of defining, explicitly and on your own terms, the kind of person you are becoming in your relationship with money. Not the kind of person you wish you were, the kind of person you are choosing to become, one small habit at a time, with patience and without self-judgment. This matters because the brain responds differently to behavior that is consistent with identity than to behavior that is imposed from outside. When you follow a budget because a financial advisor told you to, the brain experiences it as external constraint, something to comply with when observed and relax when not. But when you follow a budget because it is an expression of who you are, because you are someone who is in honest, intentional relationship with money, the compliance is internal. The behavior is self-generated, and self-generated behavior is vastly more sustainable than compliance. The question Jibun wo tsukuru asks is not, what habits should I follow? It is, who am I becoming? What kind of relationship with money reflects the person I am constructing, day by day, through these small, consistent choices? It's like the difference between following a recipe and learning to cook. The recipe tells you what to do. Learning to cook builds a part of who you are. You can forget a recipe. You cannot forget how to cook, because it has become part of you. Every tiny habit in this list is an act of jibun wo tsukuru. Every morning glance, every pause before spending, every evening reflection, every cash transaction, everything repaired instead of replaced. These are not just financial behaviors. They are the daily construction of a person who has a different relationship with money than the one the modern economy is designed to produce. And the brain, exposed consistently to these small acts of self-construction, gradually becomes the brain of that person. Not through willpower, through repetition, attention, and the quiet Japanese understanding that who you are is something you make every single day in the smallest possible choices. Try this. Write down in one sentence the person you are becoming in your relationship with money. Not who you want to be eventually, who you are becoming right now through these habits. Read that sentence before you open your wallet today, and again tomorrow, and again the day after that. Let it be true before it feels true. 8 tiny habits, each one almost invisible on its own. Each one practiced consistently, changing something in the brain that no budget or app or financial plan has ever quite reached. Mara Tsukairu, recognizing the value of what you already have. Mawo Oku, placing a pause between wanting and deciding. Terukuri no Yorokobi, finding satisfaction in making rather than buying. Ichinichi Ichizen, training the brain to notice the free satisfactions already present in daily life. Genkin Shugi, using physical money to stay present to what spending actually is. Katachi wo Mamoru, building rituals that carry financial behavior without requiring willpower. Mukuchi no Chikara, letting desires remain quiet until they can be examined honestly. And Jibun wo Tsukuru, understanding that every habit is an act of building the person you are choosing to become. What all of these have in common is that they work with the brain rather than against it. They don't ask you to suppress the instincts that make spending feel compelling. They train the brain to find what it is actually looking for: satisfaction, meaning, sufficiency, peace, in places that spending cannot offer and that life, lived with attention, already provides. The Japanese have understood for centuries what neuroscience is only now confirming: that the mind that spends less is not the mind that wants less. It is the mind that has learned to find more in what it already has. And that mind is not a different mind from the one you have now. It is the one you are building, one tiny habit at a time. So the question I want to leave with you is simply this: which of these 8 habits is the one your brain has never been given the chance to practice? And what would it feel like to give it that chance, starting today? If this conversation about the brain, about habits, and about the quiet Japanese approach to financial peace resonated with something in you, this channel exists for exactly that resonance. Every video here goes deeper into the practices and philosophies that make spending less feel not like deprivation, but like freedom. Subscribe if you want to keep building this understanding together. There is so much more here, and it only gets more interesting from here.